Let's Talk Mental Health podcast is sponsored by Torrance House Interiors East Kilbride. Concept by you, designed and managed by us. Bespoke luxury kitchens, bathrooms and room interiors. Contact us at info@torrancehouseinteriors.com or phone 07400 600 556.
Good evening, welcome to the Let's Talk Mental Health podcast. Tonight we have a very special guest, Dave Cottrell, Mindset by Dave. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm great. Brooke, how are you?
I'm fantastic.
Fantastic. And we're here to lift the stigma tonight and talk about mental health. That's what we do every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And we're delighted to be joined by Dave. And for most of you out there, you've probably seen Dave before. He was in my Mind Over Matter podcast last week. Again, so much knowledge off him that we had to get him on again because he's such a great person. And he loves talking about mental health and also mindset. Yeah. But again, like I say, we're here to lift the stigma, and Dave has kindly joined us to do that. You know, so Dave, can you tell the viewers a bit about your background and your journey, personal journey through mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the main thing was I was diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder when I was 14, or at that time, because that was 96. It was called manic depression back then. Very, very misunderstood back then. It's getting slightly less misunderstood now, but it was a lot more misunderstood back then. And there was actually a lot more stigma around it. You know, I did actually have words like psycho thrown at me and stuff back in the days. Got referred to as being moody a hell of a lot. My way of dealing with it at the time, because my dad was away from home, him and my mum had divorced. My brother was in team dad, I was in team mum, but mum had recently set up her own business when I was 10 years old, and she was kind of in the early stages of basically trying to keep a roof over our heads. So I kept so much of it to myself. Like I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't know. I was getting bullied a lot in school, and when I did open up to my dad, I'm 6'2", and I was most of the way there when I was 14. And my dad was just like, "Who could ever bully you? Look at the size of you," as if that would ever stop me. So I didn't feel like I could open up to my dad. Didn't feel like I could open up to my mum because she just had so much on her plate. One big thing is years later, when she kind of finally found out what I'd been going through at that time, she was actually absolutely heartbroken about the idea that I felt like I couldn't open up to her, and kind of told me that she would have been there for me 100%, would have wanted to know the whole time. And I think that's what a lot of people can actually experience is feeling that way about, like, we have the assumption that other people wouldn't be able to handle what we've got to say, whereas I'd kind of let that assumption rule the show for quite a long time. And as a result, I didn't really look after my physical health or my mental health until my first marriage collapsed when I was in my mid-20s. When that happened, hit one of what is now the second biggest depressive moment in my life, but at the time was the first biggest depressive moment in my life. And then sort of a few years later, having been in a very traumatic relationship, I hit what was in 2009, I hit like the worst period of my entire life, where I basically was isolated from absolutely everybody. It shut myself down from doing anything that would help my mindset or my mental health. I'd stopped training. I'd stopped seeing people. I didn't like to be within this relationship. I'd lost all relationships with friends and family. I'd been taking a lot of drugs. I'd been doing all the wrong things. And then the relationship itself broke down when I'd already given up everything else to be in that relationship. And I found myself in August 2009, having in August 2008 had this picture where I was at V Festival with my first wife. My two kids were back at home being looked after by the grandparents. I was in this picture with about 10, 15 different mates that were all there. And then it came up on my time hop in the August the following year, saying this time last year. And I looked at that image and I'm like, great. Literally none of that is in my life anymore. Like that relationship had dissolved in that period of time. All of those friendships had dissolved in that period of time. And then the relationship I'd kind of gone to that had caused the dissolution of all of these things, that dissolved as well. And I just hit absolute rock bottom. Like I felt I had nothing left to give. I felt like that my kids would be better off without me. I felt like there was no hope, and I felt like I was always going to be like that. And in August 2009, I tried to take my own life. And I'd love to say that failing that was the immediate thing that turned my life around, that made me kind of suddenly, get that new lease on life. But it wasn't until a couple of weeks later, watching a film called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, true story about a guy with locked-in syndrome. And he's there on the beach in the wheelchair, like all hooked up to kind of all these tubes and everything. And basically the quote was that even a shadow, even a fragment of a dad is still a dad. And that phrase just kind of hit me to my very core and made me suddenly, I always believed that my kids deserved better. But until that moment, I didn't believe that I could be the better that they deserved. And I've spent literally the last 11 years, like it started off trying to be the best I could possibly be for them. And then it became trying to be the best I could possibly be for my new relationship. And then it became trying to be the best I could possibly be for my clients as a personal trainer and as a mindset coach. And then finally, about 3 years ago now, I finally realized that I need to be the best I can possibly be for me. Because all of this time I've been searching for self-esteem, and none of that ever comes from anybody else. It only ever comes from yourself. So that's what I do now. I help people with their mindset and mental health, but actually primarily I try and do my best to look after myself and live with bipolar disorder to the best of my abilities. So that looking after me so that I can look after everybody else.
I'm having a bit of technical difficulties over here with the sound, guys. Are you okay over there?
Yeah, I can hear everything perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, it's just had a wee bit of technical difficulty there. I couldn't hear it for a wee second there. I don't know what was up with that, and I do apologise if I can come off.
Can I jump in with a wee question if maybe lets you catch up a wee bit, right? I just scribbled it on a wee bit of paper because I really wanted to listen to what you were saying, right? I work with a lot of children and I have done now since for the last 15 years, right? I wrote this in a really dark wee bit of paper. So I'm trying to just work out what I wrote. What did you think? So you said at that time when you were really struggling as a teenager, you weren't even able to open up to your parents, right? What do you think for your perspective? I hear that quite a lot, right? But from your perspective, what is it that stopped you?
It was the fact that I thought my mum was too busy. Like she genuinely, she worked every hour God sends. Like my mum was my absolute superhero. She took us from she got made redundant and we were absolutely on the bones of our asses basically. And she took us from that and basically built an amazing business herself. I always thought that she was just too busy, and I always thought that she just had too much on her plate as it was. Now, the one thing I want to kind of really strongly iterate here is that was never based on the way that she acted. That was based on my own interpretation. And if I look back, I can be like, right, well, other than the fact that we were told during the day, because we lived in this tiny little house in Anfield in Liverpool. And we basically, when we came home from school, we basically had our dinner on the ironing board in the kitchen. And then we went up to our rooms and we were told not to interrupt my mum until after 5 o'clock, when the work time was over. But she'd often work until 7. But we just didn't question that. It's funny because I work from home now and my kids I'm surprised they haven't wandered in already. I had to boot one of them out of this chair. He was sat here playing Fortnite.
So we might have a wee visit then.
Yeah, but
I'm just waiting for it as well.
It doesn't tend to happen when I'm on calls. That's the one thing. But if I'm doing anything that's not call related, like if I'm editing videos or anything like that, I'll just get one of them appear at the door. Or when I do live streams,
all right, that's okay.
When I get live streams on Twitch, they often kind of appear or just off camera. They won't be seen on camera, but you'll see, like, especially when the green screen's up, my son will put his hand across in a green hoodie and there'll just be a floating green hand. But But it was very different for us, like, and then because of that, we as kids, we hear between the lines, we hear things between what's said, don't we? We essentially pick things up that aren't even said. And I think I picked up from that, mum's too busy. So I always told myself that mum's too busy for this. And because my dad wasn't anywhere near as busy, I opened up to him. And it's really sad the way it went, because I lost my dad when I was 19. And I found out so many things about him after he died, about like that, in ways in which we are similar, in the fact that he was a big, massive diva like I am, like a bit whole. He liked to get up on stage. He liked to be the center of attention. He liked to kind of entertain people. But his reason for behind that was the fact that he was really nervous to have like small talk conversations and stuff. So if he got up and did those things, he never then had to go and introduce himself. I was like 4 years into public speaking by the time I realized I was exactly the same. But it's such a shame that I think for him, there was a lot of bravado around it. He had a lot of kind of, feminine energy, if you want to call it that. I think I've got the same. There was a lot of empathy. There was a lot of compassion there, but he was a bit scared of that. He'd been brought up in an environment where those things were, sissy or whatever it might actually be. So as a result, I think that was when he said, as if you could be bullied, look at the size of you. That was his way of saying, my big so-called strong son, like there's no way, I can't believe this, I can't accept this. But vulnerability and things like that were kind of really pushed to one side. And it was only after my dad had died that my mum said that my dad went through his own spats of depression, but he never got any help for it. Not once in his life did he ever get any help for it. So I opened up to him, and because it only took one time where he said, oh yeah, I got the wrong response, what I was hoping for. And this is, I think, what a lot of young people, they fear that wrong response. And I mean, when I work with young people, I'm like open up. Like, if you get the wrong response, the one that you don't want, open up to somebody else, because we can't guarantee the response that you're going to get. I started really learning to understand my bipolar disorder about 4 or 5 years ago. And that was after 20 years of living with it. So now I don't have the expectation that everyone else is going to understand it.
And I think that's a really important point. If you open up, if you get that courage to open up as a child, a young person, and you don't get that response, it can be very easy just to start suppressing again, can't it? So it is about just encouraging people to keep talking about it in a safe way. I think what I just want to touch on as well is, it's very interesting that you had mentioned there that it was that you seen something that wasn't really there. So you kind of thought your mum was far too busy, but she wasn't.
Yeah.
She would have been there for you. And I think that's something that I stress with parents that I work with, to start creating that space, even if it's just a wee 20 minutes each week, that you don't have to say, kids, come on, we'll round the table and this is when we'll all talk about our emotions, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of them will run a mile. But just totally. To have that, I probably will do that, right? My sister used to joke and say, my kids will be the ones meditating on a Saturday night on cushions on the floor, right? But I think it's important as parents just to even create that wee space. Even the best time sometimes can be in the car when you don't have that eye contact, just to be asking them, how's things? How are you feeling? How are you feeling about that? And it's just about that message, that gentle message about, I'm here to listen when you're ready to speak. Can be so powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely important.
Absolutely.
I do that now, Brooke, with my son. I make sure I'm asking him how he is every day, because he's been off school a lot. He's got very severe asthma, and he's had a time it through lockdown. So I make sure that I ask him how he is every day, because dealing with that, again, is, it will help his mental health. What about you, Dave? Do you kind of do that?
So the first big thing I ever did, and I think you've shared the You Are Enough video on your page at one point, the You Are Enough video, it's at the top of my YouTube, it's at the top of my Facebook. I wrote that for my kids like 3 years ago now, and it was basically an explicit list of everything I actually think about them. I was listening to some Gary Vee while I was washing the dishes, and he was like, what's the most inspiring thing for you? He's like, understand that you're going to die. And I was like, crap, what if I is like, because there's so much that got left unsaid from my dad, and I've been putting the pieces together for the last 19 years. And I was like, right, well, if I was to die tomorrow, what would be the thing I wanted to do? What I wanted to do to like my kids to know. And I went up, and in one fell swoop, I wrote this poem like without even breathing, you know, like not even quite without breathing, but like I was like just typed the whole thing up, and I've never edited it. And it was just exactly what I needed to say. And it was never intended to be a piece of content. And I asked my wife to come up so I could read it to her. I read it to her, burst out crying about 3 times reading it. And then I was there thinking, I was like, I needed this. I was like, that was kind of like, I wasn't just I'd written it for my kids, but I was like, I needed this as well. And then I was like, how many of my clients need to read this? And so I ended up making it into a video, which has kind of been like viewed about 100,000 times on Facebook now, which is ridiculous, really. It's kind of bonkers when I put my head around it. I think I've been trying to create a new one of those ever since as a result of that. But that was the starting point. And it was when I realized, like, I've never actually used the expression "here between the lines" before. And I saw Brooke's reaction when I said it. And I'm like, it's actually quite a good expression. I think I might use that again. And it's like, because it's only recently I've been spending a lot of time thinking about when we hear things that aren't said. You know, I deal with clients with not feeling good enough. And one of the big questions is we try and figure out where that's come from. For me, I think I mentioned to you on the Mind Over Matter podcast last week, it was come from my dad and my brother pretending I was invisible. Yeah. So because they pretended I was invisible, I then took on the belief that I was invisible. And I spent the rest of my life trying wearing bright purple colors, you know, like being 6'2", putting on a ton of weight, getting up on stage, wearing t-shirts that say fat people are hard to kidnap, spraying my hair different colors, all sorts of things. I did everything I could to just try and be seen but no matter what, I still felt like I was invisible. Now I've worked with clients that have been literally physically told they're not good enough whilst being physically abused, which is a very obvious way. But I also had one client about 3 years ago that she came to me and said that her dad, she got an A on her maths test, and basically her dad was like, yeah, we know you're good at maths. What did you get on your English? And she wasn't as good on English. And she said, all I wanted was my dad to kind of celebrate with me about the fact that I got this A, but he made it about the fact that what I got on English. And it was always like, there was never any celebration. And she said, it's always just made me feel like I was never good enough for him. She said, a life of being a perfectionist. And at that point I was like, oh my God, I've said the same thing to my son. Like never maliciously. My eldest son's ridiculously good at maths. And I used to big him up about it all the time. But sometimes I'd say, oh, we know you're good at maths. How are you getting on with your other subjects? And I was like, never anything malicious about it. But it was that point I'm like, you know what, this can happen. It can happen with so many of the best of intentions. For about 6 weeks, I was an absolute terrified parent that anything I said. And then I thought, you know what, how about I just explicitly tell my kids, I'll tell them that they are good enough for me, because it's reading between the lines again. That like, if that parent had turned around and said, look, I'm absolutely made up with you on that. You're absolutely amazing at these things. You know, your value as a child is not, or your value as a person is not related on your grades. But I would also like to know what you got in English. Like, no one's ever going to say that sentence. But if you'd have said it like that, then there wouldn't have been the issue, because it's the reading between the lines thing. And we do, we hear things that aren't really being said. You know, it's like, especially like this year when Black Lives Matter came back up, so many people heard white lives don't, when it was never being said, not once, but people were hearing it anyway. And this is one of those big things. It's like, okay, what are we actually hearing out there that's not being said? There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame in mental health. You know, we're talking about raising the stigma. There's a lot of contribution to the stigma from people who suffer with mental health as well, because they see shame in everything. I don't know, maybe you've lived an entire life where things have been treated shamefully, but it's like, but it gets to that point where a person becomes conditioned to shame and hears an insult where none wasn't even offered. You know, like if you say the compliment, oh, you look really good today, a person who hears, we can read between the lines on that and say, well, this person thinks I don't look good every other day. It's, you know, it's like there was a video.
I would say that's maybe not that example wasn't really reading behind the line, reading between the lines. That's more about almost overgeneralizing, isn't it? And having that kind of faulty thinking that there's an ulterior motive behind.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, my absolute favorite one for reading between the lines is, and I do this in talks all the time, is, okay, so back when we're all, maybe Brooke's not quite old enough to remember the house phone, just the house phone. But
I am.
So when we had the house phone, you'd phone someone on the house phone. I wonder if mine's still around here. And if someone didn't answer the house phone, what would you think?
Mm-hmm.
You'd think that they were busy, or they were out, or they were gone the toilet.
Yeah.
Like, back in the day, we didn't take the phone in the toilet with us. Now, as soon as the good old mobile phone came along and someone doesn't answer, what's the first thing we think? We think they're avoiding me, or worse, they hate me, they don't like me. And then we might then go and send them a WhatsApp message, saying, hi, just trying to get hold of you. See how, get back to me when you're ready. And then you'll see the 1 grey tick, the 2 grey ticks, and the 2 blue ticks. As soon as you see the 2 blue ticks, they're definitely going to reply now. And then they don't. Yeah. Now they really hate me. You start obsessing over what did you do the last time that you the last time you spoke to this person.
And I think a lot of people do.
Sorry, but I think social media has made that worse as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in Messenger, stuff like that. It's totally went beyond the point.
Absolutely, and I think it's an approach. It's a kind of anxious approach, isn't it? And people that tend to do that tend to be caught up in that fast pace, just going through one day to the next, and always expecting that reaction. But I don't think everybody lives like that. I do think when we can take control of the mind and we can slow down and we can tune in, we can start to look at things a wee bit more from the intelligent mind, so not just from that emotional mind that's making up all these cognitive distortions, or the logical mind that's too logical that can't empathise with anybody. When we can come from that intelligent mind, we can think, well, actually, there might be a reason as to why they've not responded. It might be that they're not feeling good. It might be, and again, I think we can, if we start to take control of the mind, we can start to manage that. Dave, I just want to go back to something that you said, and I think it's really, really important, right? I had just done a live at 7:00 in a parenting group tonight, and I touched on the very point that you said, that parents can say things that cause a big impact.
Yeah.
That they don't actually realise, and I agree with you that nobody sets out, and I kind of stressed that in that live, that no parent sets out to put doubts in a child's mind, but when you're not consciously thinking about the wording or how you're reacting, you can actually be creating real challenges for your child in the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to throw myself under the bus because it makes most other parents feel a little bit more comfortable. And the one I will say that I've been super guilty of is when one of my kids first had experience with bullying in school, he told me what the bullying was, and it was kind of like the odd kind of push in the back of your seat while you're on the bus, and a little bit of name calling, and a kid that would just keep on staring at him. And the thing was, like, I'd basically, when I'd gone through bullying in school, I'd had my hair set on fire. I got force-fed grass whilst being surrounded by about 20 or 30 people at one point. I was, basically, I never got anything broken, but I was bruised, battered, completely and utterly. And in this, I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but when my son told me about that, my first response was, "Oh, that's not bullying. This is bullying." Now, the first thing I've done then, and this is years ago, before I'd had any of my training and started even realizing, as you just said, empathy is super important. That's me logically saying, well, logically speaking, my bullying is bigger than your bullying, and therefore your bullying doesn't count. That's like saying that, like, the only person whose problem in the world counts is the person with the biggest problem in the world.
And I think some people can respond like that when they haven't healed the event, so it's still very much, there's still a lot of emotional charge in it. And for what I heard when you says about that bit of content you read, it was never supposed to be content. What kept going over and over in my mind was, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was like a bit of, you were giving that to your children, but you were also doing some inner child healing when that was coming out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it ended up being exactly what I needed to hear, and that's the whole thing. I always say that I learned how not to parent from my dad. It's really hard to say, and I really hope that my sisters never listen to any of my content, because he was great to them, but he wasn't great to me. There was, like, the version of him that I've got is a very different version than the version they got, and I think I'm like, right, well, these are all the things I needed to hear. I developed huge amounts of daddy issues. I would look up to male mentors like like I would just do anything to make a male mentor proud, and it'd feel good. It was like a little drug. So I was still kind of like while I was still new and was craving that, I didn't really deal with my own self-esteem issues until literally 2 years ago. It was in October 2 years ago, and I wrote the You Are Enough poem the year before that. So yes, I was absolutely still, and definitely when it comes to comparing with my son, this was the end of primary school for him, and he's in year 11 now. So this is 5 years ago. This is well before I'd actually started doing all that. But I think it's one of those things that my adversity had toughened me up. And what I was concerned about was the fact that I was concerned what I wanted, I suppose, even though I hated the fact that my dad had made me go through my adversity on my own, basically. I kind of wanted him to go through some of it on his own. And it's something I don't exactly know where I sit on it, to be honest, because there's a great expression I love, which is our job is to prepare the child for the road, not to prepare the road for the child. Like part of me wanted to swoop in, get rid of the bullies, get everything done. Another part of me wants him to go through that learning experience. Now, you never want your child to go through the things that you did. However, I can't sit back and say that what I went through didn't shape me. I don't think I would do what I do to the level that I do it and be able to empathize with people to the level that I am if I'd never been through anything. So
when you get it out the other side and it's in a place where it feels much better and the emotional charge is taken out of it, and again you can see it for that intelligent mind, it does become, and it means that you can really connect with other people that have been through it. But I think that going back to that, well, here's what my bullying was, that's not bullying again, is that need to be seen, isn't it? And still that need to know this is what happened to me. And when you can work through that process of healing, that kind of need to be seen, you start to feel seen and you start to feel heard, don't you? And it just becomes that, right, well, I've been through this. There's different levels of it. There's different experiences. But I can support you now because I don't need to be the one that's been seen.
Yeah, I'm not sure if
Dave, that's what I was going to ask you.
But
I'm going to ask you, how are you with your healing right now? What would you say? Where are you at with your healing? I'm still healing from mine, and like I say, I went through a lot of bullying as well. It was very tough, so I can totally vibe you in that. But my healing's every day. It tends to come and go. I've been through a lot of anxiety issues with lockdown. How do you find yours from healing?
Yeah, so I mean, lockdown's been a really weird one in terms of bipolar, because I would say that whereas normally a bipolar cycle would be over months and months and months, for me nowadays, it used to be all the time in depression, tiny little high, all the time in depression. But now it kind of ebbs and flows over the case of months. During lockdown, it went weird in terms of like there's something in bipolar called rapid cycling, which is you can jump between the high and the low multiple times in the day. I was getting that, and I'd only ever experienced that a couple of times before. In terms of it, I think it is an ongoing process. It is something that I have to look after. The one thing I would say that I've not quite come to terms with yet is I can still find myself being occasionally quite a jealous person. When this became really noticeable was when it was always kind of when other people were doing better than you. It was easy enough to kind of say, well, I'm jealous of that because I want that for myself. But it was this really weird experience when some of my friends in mental health started doing like really well within their career. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like cut down the middle because I'm so proud for this friend. Yet at the same time, absolutely fuming. Like last year, one of my close friends, Sam, he got, we both applied for the same TED Talk and he got it. And I've never been more proud of one of my friends really than him getting that. And at the same time, I was like totally and utterly, totally and utterly defensive and jealous. But what I've actually found in the last sort of couple of months is we talk about imposter syndrome a lot on my podcast, and I'm with guests when I talk, like whenever I'm talking to guests, it comes up a lot. And it was only recently that I realized that my imposter syndrome goes in tangent with my in tandem, with my bipolar disorder. So when I'm all the way up here, my imposter syndrome says, "You're better than everybody else. Everything, you're amazing. You're like, why would anyone not want to listen to you?" And then when it comes and tanks down here, it's like, well, everything you say is useless. It's pointless. What's the point of even being out there? And then, but most of the time I live in the middle, so we're kind of okay. So that's, I suppose, where I'm at with it now. Is I've got a little bit of an issue with jealousy that I've only started realizing over the last year or so, and I have to kind of make sure that I don't listen to the narcissistic top end of the mania, and also don't listen to the kind of depressive defeatist bottom end of the depression, because each one of those things will tell a distortion, and each one of them, neither one of them ends good. It's like when the mania says you're better, you're doing, your content's better, or your videos are better, or whatever. It still gets jealous. It's like, well, it's better than that person's video. Why is it not doing so well? And I think it's an interesting one. And I'm glad you actually asked the question, because it's dead hard to actually talk about this. What mental health or mindset coach wants to stand up and admit, I have jealousy issues? It's like that's not a very healed person. But at the same time, we're humans and we're real. And I don't profess to have all of the answers yet. I profess to be, as I said earlier, working on myself at the same time.
And I think that was
I think
that was a really important point. We don't have all the answers, and I think there's a place for us all when it comes to working in mental health. And you'll be the mindset person for so many people. I'll be for so many people. James, there's enough to go around, because not everybody's going to connect to us. And I think it was that kind of cycle, that important cycle that you spoke about earlier on, about wanting to be the best for this person, then this person, then this person, then going, actually, I need to be the best for me, because that's where it all starts. And I don't know if we ever get to a place where that we're completely healed, right? I like to see it as we're always growing, we're always evolving. Every time we learn something more about ourselves, there's another part. We'll never go, right, that's me reached 40, and that's me sorted. I'm a whole person. I think what life always throws us into challenges. So rather than, I think we do need to heal for some situations, but I do think we're always growing. I would like to think that I'm still going to be that person, that pensioner that is still working in mental health and still motivating people, but still being willing to look at what I wanted, what I need to do for myself too.
Yeah, I hope I'm that person too.
Definitely.
Well, we will be.
Definitely. No, I mean, that's see for me, and that's what I was explaining to Brooke at the weekend there. I was always really bad with communicating. It's something that I've always struggled with. That through my, from my own personal mental health battles, and this is why I started the podcast, because for me, communicating to somebody like yourself, communicating to Brooke, this is quite nervy for me, but I still do it. I've got to put myself, in the firing line, and double down on my weaknesses, and that's what I'm doing. I took that for David Goggins, by the way. I love him. So it's something that I have to do, but
I think that's important, isn't it? When we notice something about, we recognise something about ourselves that doesn't really sit very comfortable with us, been pushing ourselves out of that comfort zone and being able to look at, right, how do I communicate, right, how can I be supportive without feeling that jealousy on either side of the scale. And I think when we can ask ourselves those really, really deep questions, it's very empowering. And yes, I guess there's some people that might think, well, I've been in mental health, being a mental health expert, you've got it 100% healed. You've got it all together all the time. And I think what you said, Dave, was true. We're real people, right? And I think as long as we are confident enough to ask ourselves some of those dark and deep questions that take us into that kind of deep part of our soul, sometimes to look at some of the actions, behaviours, choices we've made that's not that good, to be willing to say, right, how can I grow for this? And I think clients pick up on that, don't they? If you're willing to grow and you're willing to expand, or you come for that fixed mindset of, I don't need to do anything, I'm just perfect. People pick up on that vibe.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier is perfect about it, in terms of this. it's about you being the right person for the person that you're speaking to. And the fact is that there are probably plenty of people out there that would benefit from one of those completely closed off, very clinical therapists that actually doesn't bring any empathy to it, just brings techniques. And there's equally people that benefit from a person who doesn't have any techniques or actual clinical training, but just has a really inspiring story. And there's everything in between. And that's the whole thing. It's like, if, as you said, there's plenty of people to help to go around, and it comes down to how you vibe, how you connect with that person. That's why I love coming on podcasts. That's why I love having other people on mine. It's because, like, people have in the past said to me, because I think coming from the personal training industry, it was a little bit different. People like, why would you have other people within your industry on your podcast? It's like, well, if I actually help the person that's listening to my podcast find someone that they get along with even better than they get along with me, then I've done them a great service there. And it's, you know, it's collaboration, not competition, which is kind of like how I feel with my friend Sam. You know, my friend Sam,
I like that collaboration. I like that,
and I think that comes to a real place of lack, doesn't it? And my mindset almost certainly goes, well, why would you not have somebody in the same field as you? Because as you say, some people are going to connect with me, and some people are going to connect with you. Some people are going to connect with James. Some people are going to, well, we all bring ourselves, and as long as we're just being us, people will be drawn to us. So I completely agree with you there that, and I think that's quite the lack mindset, that scarcity, that I need to hold it and I just need to have everybody coming to me. But it is about working together, and that word collaboration, but being confident enough to know the right people will come to me. And if those that don't come to me will get the right support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the big reasons what I wanted to do when I moved into the mental health industry, because the personal training, the physical health industry, as James will know, it can be a little bit cutthroat. It can be a little bit like everyone wants to act as if they invented the bench press. You know, it's like we get it drummed into our heads that we need a USP. We need that reason that people have got to come to us. So people throw together workouts that make absolutely no sense, but look good on Instagram. And it's like, and that competition thing, it's like, okay, yeah, again, now, especially now that we're in the world of online, so anyone can train anyone, you would have maybe collaborated with someone from a different town, because the guy that's down the road from you is not going to go 60 miles to go and train with somebody else. But now that the online thing's there, it's like that can come even more. And it was actually, weirdly enough, the inspiration for this for me, and one of the other coaches that I used to work with we were both big craft beer enthusiasts, right? And we watched the way the craft beer industry worked. And the craft beer industry it's basically a rising tide raises all the ships. You know, there's collaborations. People love a collaboration within craft beer. They love it when two breweries come together and put something together. And other breweries will stock other breweries' beers as well, because they know that by improving the quality of the overall industry, then everyone benefits. Absolutely. And that's the same in mental health. Anyone's got a USP in mental health, it's ridiculous. You know, if someone turns around to me and says, this is the only way to cure depression. In fact, actually, there's a great way I've not put it in a post yet. It's kind of in my drafts ready to go. But the thing is, especially online, people go looking for the cure for mental health, and we're not going to find the cure for mental health. But what we're going to find is we're going to find improvements. We're going to find ideas that might improve you by 5%, 10%, 15%. If we start looking for the cure, because if you go online, if you go on Instagram looking for the cure to bipolar, it's like, first of all, everything you see is not going to add up. Someone might be saying exercise, like me and James talked last week. Like someone might say exercise, another person might say ice baths, another person might say journaling, another person might say this. Guess what? All of those things work, but they all work to a different level for different people. And if people are if their outcome is, I want to find the cure, well, you're not going to find the cure in exercise. You'll find a benefit in exercise, but you won't find the cure. But if you're looking for the cure and it isn't the cure, you'll reject it and you won't bother. And if you reject all of these extra 10% things, then you reject a piecemeal solution that could add up to being the exact thing that you're looking for. But because no one thing is the cure, then you get stuck because you're not finding what you're looking for. So you go, well, that'll never work. Therefore, why even bother?
Yeah, and I think in mental health, I think you're right.
That was my mindset, but that's what I was going to say. The finding the cure. See, when I first started my mental health project, it was like, I need to find a cure for mental health. Like you say, Dave, there's not a cure. You've just got to find what works and what benefits you, you know. And we'll get there. We're lifting the stigma. We're adding to it now. So great, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it is just about, in mental health, it is just about showing up and being yourself and not having to feel. I mean, I put a post out, I think it was this morning, about I'm seeing so many people with mental health trying to be authentic and trying to be, and it's almost like they're forced in this, and you can feel the vibe. They're not just being themselves, they're almost trying to force this authenticity. Authenticity can't be forced.
Exactly.
Right? So just relax and just be you and just show up with intentions every day to bring your knowledge, your experience, and your good feelings about lifting the stigma, helping people understand themselves, and being able to find what is going to help them cope with mental health. That's all you need to do. See all these people try to do all these out there posts or these wacky posts, or like trying to show unedited material just to it's a lot of it's so staged, and I think that people are meaning well, right? I do think everybody means well, but I think sometimes it's when they're using their passion in a not so good way. So they're so desperate to help people, and that desperation is trying to rush the process, then trying to force authenticity to say, I'm different, look at me, I can do this and I can do that, and I can be really normal and I can be really down to earth. But actually, see if you just strip all that back and you just bring your pure self to the table every day and just tell people what you can do for them. That's all people are looking for.
Yeah,
because that forcing those posts is going to push people away.
I think the thing that makes it all quite messy is the fact that everyone who's trying to be a mental health, and I'll use the word in quote, influencer. I actually am trying to be a mental health influencer, but I'm not trying to influence you to buy skinny tea. I'm trying to influence you to have better mental health. I don't have a problem with that phrase as long as we understand what is influence. I am genuinely trying to influence the way people think. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I think what they've got is we're towing, sort of towing that line of either being it's a business and you're trying to grow it, or it's mental health information and it's trying to be what is needed. And you do genuinely have to kind of, if you want it to grow, you have to kind of almost have a little bit of a foot in both of those worlds, which gets a lot messy because, people who create content, if I look at content creators in other fields, and they are susceptible to burnout as well, just as much as anybody else. But a person in a mental health field, it's like we're very, very susceptible to burnout, because if a piece of content, if you think this is going to help so many people and it doesn't do so well, and your anticipations for it are there, and it doesn't quite live up to where you're actually hoping for it to, you can get quite emotional about that, especially when you think to yourself, like, the person like with the same number of followers as you is posting Fortnite highlight reels and getting 600 likes on that, and you're posting the cure for mental health. You're posting like the most useful piece of information that you've ever learned, and it's just it's getting received by silence. But the thing is, mental health content is extremely difficult to engage with. If a person's watching a video, if a person was watching this, for example, they might not hit that like button until they've watched the whole hour, because at any point within that hour, one of us could say something completely wacky and off the wall that they don't agree with. But also, it's
that would probably be me.
But also, there's a big thing where people don't always want to be seen as liking that stuff, because if you like a post about depression, that
then you need support.
It might mean that you got depression, and it's a very difficult thing to support. So the numbers are never going to quite add up. And it's like you both said, you got into this with the idea to kind of just help. Just if I can just help one person, then that's enough. And that needs to remain being a person's goal, because I've gone in sort of kind of fits and starts of this where my goal is to help, and then I'm like, right, well, I want to help more people. So briefly, my goal becomes to grow the channel. And if I sit in that thing of to grow the channel, that influences the type of content I put out, because I'll put I'll put content out that is geared to grow rather than to serve. And then eventually I start feeling kind of murky about that. And then it's like, I'll sit there and go, am I actually serving people as well as I possibly could? And if you do end up serving people, the thing that I would say to any person out there doing mental health work is that there are so many more people thinking positively about the content than you will ever hear about. I'll get people. I had a guy 3 weeks ago that messaged me to say, oh, I've been following you for the last 2 years and I just wanted to reach out and say that I love what you're doing. That's like, we always assume, going back, this almost ties in with what we were talking about earlier, hearing between the lines, reading between the lines. This goes back to, we assume that people think, if we assume that people think our content's rubbish, if it's getting 3 likes, then everyone must have hated it. Not necessarily. We never sit there and go, oh, well, I'm surely there must be people out there that love this, that just aren't reaching out to me. And it's, again, negativity bias at play. It's our insecurities at play.
And so I agree with that there. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Fortunately enough, for me, I've lost energy in other places, but that's one place I've never lost energy in, right? I don't review my statistics. I don't look at my likes. I'm not even interested in that because this is my life purpose, and I've known this since I was a wee girl that I was going to do this, right? So I just think, like you're saying, I'm here to do this, right? I believe genuinely from my heart and soul that my content does add value to people's lives. I don't need a like, or I don't. Also, I get clients come on, they tie themselves in knots because they look at other people in their field. I have never gone out to look at other people in my field to see what they actually went to a training course through Business Gateway when I first built the business, when I moved to working in organisations to working for myself. And I left the training course halfway through because what they were telling you was it was all about social media and ways that you can track other people in your field, social media, to see what likes they're getting. I've got no interest in that. I don't care if somebody gets 100 likes and I get 1 like, because I know from my heart and soul that every single day I am genuinely adding value because that's my life purpose. So I don't review statistics. I don't go through my social media. I don't actually ever go back and check how many times anything was viewed because I just see that as a complete waste of energy. And I think it is, loads of people do it as a challenge for a lot of people we need to work with if it is. But I would fortunately say that it hasn't been the case for me because I just keep thinking, as you say, people will reach out and say, look, I've been watching your stuff for 3 years and that's me just feeling like I'm ready to reach out. I've had it so many times, like you all have had. So we know it's reaching people. And I think that's going back to that coming out of that intelligent mind and getting caught up in that faulty thinking, the cognitive distortions. I'm not enough. If people don't click like, I'm not enough. And it just drains our energy. See if we can continue to just show up from our heart and from a place that we're just adding value all the time. Don't overthink content. Just let it flow. Get the raw content out there as well as the content that think of. Then it's going to grow. Unfortunately, it will grow. But also
that's what we said
value.
about this. Aye, and that's what we said about this, Brooke. We want this to be raw, Dave. You know what I mean? We want this to just like, we'll do it from the start and that's it. We'll post whatever we have on here and post it to YouTube, post it to Facebook, you know, because that's what you're all about. And again, we don't have all the answers, but, you know, if we can, you know, help somebody, maybe that day, great, fantastic, you know. And that's what this is about. It's about lifting the stigma, putting out raw content, and hopefully people see it. If they don't, then that's all good, you know. But we're practiced.
Yeah, and I'm a great believer the people that are supposed to see it will always be drawn to it, and the people that aren't supposed to see it or aren't ready for it or don't wish for it, they just won't be drawn to it. And I think it is just, as James says, we did have a chat at the start. Should we make this really structured? Should we just go with the flow? And we've had a bit of a laugh behind the scenes because we've thought there is times where we all talk over the top of one another. But do you know what? That's raw and that's real. Actually, I'll share something that I laughed that much 2 weeks ago, that my chair flew back the way and I had to pull it in and I had to say, James, nobody would have noticed that part, fellas. So
it's like that's a Scottish thing as well. It's like we talk. It's a big talking thing, you know. Scottish. We talk over the top of each other. You know what I mean? But it's I like it. I enjoy the rawness of it. So, can I ask tips for better well-being? I'll go to you first, Brooke. What is your biggest tip for mental well-being? Right, my biggest tip is quiet in the mind. Right, so quiet in the mind. Slowing down and tuning in. I will meditate 4 and 5 times a day, right? James and I had a laugh about this because that is just the way that is what I have to do, because I am an empath. I do pick up on people's emotions. I do sometimes feel the world's pain at times. So I need to constantly be clearing my emotions. So for me,
meditation is great. Now, not everybody has to meditate 5 times a day because everybody's different, but I'm a big believer in meditation because it can quiet the mind, it can slow it down, but also meditation actually changes the way the brain functions over a period of time. So you can actually properly reprogram how your brain responds to things. So that's my number one tip, is to meditate. If you're somebody that's just starting meditation, start with 5 minutes a day. That's enough.
Dave, what about yourself?
Yeah. Mine would be get yourself a takeout menu. Now, I don't mean a literal takeout menu to abracadabra. I think I mentioned this on the podcast last week, but the way I like to deal with self-care,
but it's brilliant.
Yeah, the way I like to deal with self-care is by realizing we say it so many times, there's no one size fits all, and that's the thing, is that I call it lazy coaching. I don't suggest self-help to other people because I let them make their own list, because ultimately you get that thing where if you suggest I love meditation, I'm a big fan of it, but if you suggest meditation to a room full of people, you'll automatically see about 40% of them shut off, which is good. That means they're meditating because they've got the result they're looking for. But the same, like, I find stand-up comedy works great for me even when I'm depressed. There's almost a part of my brain that it sneaks into the more I try and resist it. Colouring in works for me. There's loads of different things that work for me, but what I do is I tell people to get curious and figure out what works for themselves. And why I say curious is because we have it drummed into us that curiosity killed the cat, and all the rest of that. So we don't try out new things. It's like, we just get that whole, I would say the number one thing I hear in the mental health field is that'll never work when you make a suggestion. So if I say to a person, right, okay, what do you think would actually work to reduce your stress levels? And then I get them to write it down, and I get them to write as many items as they want. And this is why I call it a takeout menu, because if it's a to-do list, they think they've got to do all of it before they get their stress relief. Whereas if it's a takeout menu, you don't look at the menu for abracadabra and be like, I've got to eat 60 different kebabs before I have my dinner. It's like, no, you just look at it, pick which one you want and go for it. If you've got a list of things that actually work for you, meditation, you can meditate by listening to music and paying perfect attention to it, as much attention to it as possible. That's an amazing form of mindfulness. You can do mindfulness with food. You can do mindfulness with sex if that's your thing. It's actually brilliant. But it's you can actually be mindful with a lot of different things. You can be mindful with drawing, you can be mindful with painting, you can be mindful with a jigsaw, you can be mindful walking the dog. And I've just made about 1 million suggestions, but take a few from them and write them all down, because when you say which ones are right for you, when because I couldn't possibly know who's at the other end of this microphone, but the person at the other end of this microphone knows who they are. And if that feels like it might work for you, go for it. Or even if it feels like it might not work for you, but you've never tried it, give it a little whirl. Get used. That
sounds good. It sounds like a good idea. How much would you suggest on that list? What would be a suggestion?
I was going to say, I think this is how it ended up being called a takeout menu, because I think I'd say to us people, write 4 or 5 things, and then people would send them back to me with like 30 things on it. One of my recent clients has knocked them down into kind of like, he's cut it as like quick meals, longer meals. They're not actually meals, but they're like, things that take 5 minutes and are easy and all the rest of it. And it was great, the one that he's just sent me. But actually the best variation of it I ever had was from a 12-year-old. One of my clients' sons, he actually sent one to me, and it was like, his was his self-care menu, and it was such and such with a side of. So it'd be like a bath with a side of candles. It's like everything had a side of with it. And he'd taken the takeout menu idea and just taken it to the next level, and I absolutely loved it. But the beauty of it being is I would say have at least 5 things on there, and like put something on there that the one I absolutely love that I actually, because I like to kind of follow my own advice because I don't want to be too much of a hypocrite, is last year I did this thing called the Month of Mindset, and every single day we had a different self-care task, and I made sure there was a few things on that list that I'd never even tried myself, one of which was having a pamper. So there are, if you go on my Instagram and scroll back far enough, there's pictures and videos of me sat there in a nice green face mask, with my book and me candles on the side with me meditation music and all the rest of it. I love having a pamper. I honestly thought that's not for me, and I tried it, but I've been banging on to people. You've got to be curious. You've got to try new things. And then I was like, Dave, come on. When was the last time you tried something that wasn't one of your go-to favorites? And I did that, and I love it. Mint julep face mask. It's I love it.
I mean, it's a fantastic idea. What I'm just thinking of, some of the clients that I work with, right? If they put together this list of 30 things and they open it in a time of overwhelm, it just might be too overwhelming. Would they choose? So what would, because it's a fantastic idea, but what is there a wee backup version that you would have in times of complete overwhelm when you don't have that, relaxed kind of maybe mindset to go, right, what do I need just now?
Yeah, I guess that's why I frame it as the takeout menu, because the last thing I want someone to do is look at that and say, I've got to do all of this. And that's why I'm like, it's not a to-do list, it's an idea list. And if all else fails, just spin your finger and put one on. But I suppose in that situation that you've just said, then you get a person to write a smaller version of it, or they put stars next to their 3 go-to ones. Because ultimately that's what you want it to be. You want it to be a cheat sheet, because every single person, if they're in that period of overwhelm, they're going to be reaching for food or alcohol or a Netflix binge or, or maybe even self-harm. Like, they're going to be reaching for a coping mechanism that's been ingrained so much that they need that really quick alternative.
And that's a good idea, the stars next to it, because then when you open this, maybe you've put 50 items, say, on it, which are all great, but you're in this complete panic mode. If you've got stars beside 5 of them, then it makes it much easier to choose, doesn't it?
And it is really the same as a takeout menu, because most people that actually do this, like with your favorite takeout, you have a dish that you know you're going for, but you still go look at the menu anyway, and it's like, and then you go back.
I've never done that. I'll just go for the same.
I was gonna say, and then because you're Scottish, you go for your deep fried Mars bar, so you do.
I've never
That's a good Scottish accent. That's not a bad Scottish accent. And another thing, guys, obviously I'm trying to get a professional opinion here, because obviously I'm not the mental health professional here. I do have, again, like I say, a project. So again, what I talk about on my project is about routine and mental health, a good routine. Can you kind of fill us on a bit about that, Brooke, as well, and Dave?
So a good routine for me is less is more. Right, and that's based on a lot of the feedback I get. So sometimes when I get clients coming to me, they've been doing they've been trying personal development for so long, right? A lot of people, especially if you think about business owners, right, they read all these personal development books and then go, "Oh my God, I'm doing 10 things before I start my work. I can't do that. I can't fit all that in." Right? But you don't have to get up at 5 and do this and do that and do that. I've never got up at 5, and here I am. So I just think less is more, and I think, just to mirror what Dave says, is helping people get to know, right, what do you want from a routine? Do you want a get up and go out the bed? Do you want to be screaming and shouting out the window, good morning to everybody? Or do you need a relaxed morning? How do you work getting into your morning? So less is more, maybe picking 2 or 3 things that you do, especially in the morning, because research tells us that what we do in that first 20 minutes has a huge impact on how our day goes. So what I kind of suggest is finding what works for you. So I never used to meditate in the morning because I didn't need it. When I came out of sleep, I felt quite good. But there's been times where I think, I just maybe need a 5-minute meditation just to add a wee bit extra value. So again, just less is more, picking 2 or 3 things that you need from your morning to get you up and going is what works. Not 10 things, not 15 things, not listening to all these motivational speakers that say you have to get up at 5 in the morning before your business will become a success.
That was me. I used to do that at the start, man. Like, you know what I mean? Listen to all the motivational speeches, get up at 4 o'clock. I was getting up at 4 o'clock, to get my breakfast. And then I was just looking into things too much, Brooke, Dave, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd very much echo a lot of what Brooke just said then. I thought that was spot on. But it's down to the routine needs to fit the person as much as the person needs to fit the routine. And the thing is, there will be people out there that absolutely flourish on routine. If they had every minute of their day planned out and things that they've got to do, there are people out there that will do amazingly well with that. There are other people out there that will feel so intimidated by that if they miss one thing, the whole rest of it goes out the window. Going back to what Brooke said as well, the first 20 minutes, it's something called priming, and there's something that I use called bookending, which basically priming is what happens at the beginning of your day. And then the last thing you do before you go to sleep as well. Now, the thing is, all of these pieces of content that are out there are saying the only way or the best way to do this is you've got to do it all here, there, and the everywhere. And then a person's like, well, if I've missed it in the first thing in the morning, then I can't do it until tomorrow. It's like a New Year's resolution, you know. If I miss it, if I cock it up on January the 4th, well, it's like, let's hit the reset button next December.
Let's wait till next.
Yeah, and it's that's the whole thing. Is like, I remember saying to one of my clients, she was like, all right, I'm gonna train at 10 a.m. every morning, and I was like, okay. And I said, right, so what happens if it gets to 10:01 and you've not started training? She's like, well, I'll just leave it till tomorrow. I was like, exactly. So, okay, right. It's like, I'm going to train at some point. Now that person needed to be like, right, well, if I don't train at 10, then I train at 10:05, or there's always an opportunity. Often a routine for some people can be the most restrictive thing, but the idea of bookending, I try to stick by this one, is I try to make the first thing and the last thing I do to be proactive rather than reactive. So that means I'll do something like, even if it's just 30 seconds of stretching when I first wake up before I check my phone, because I can be known. If I don't check that phone for the first 2 hours, it's brilliant. And I should use that more often. But again, human, I don't do it all the time. The big one that I've really been doing, and I think I'm on about 45 days in a row right now, because I like to keep accountable for what I'm doing, and I'll log it. That helps me a lot, is reading before bed instead of the phone before bed, because I wasn't doing social media and messages. I was playing a game on my phone because it was a nice little bit of downtime, a nice little bit of distraction, but I'd still be playing the game in my head. And then, like, when I put it down, you know, the blue light and all the rest of that's not good for you. So I found that reading, I've never got time to read. It's like, yeah, but you've got time to play Tap Titans 2 for like 45 minutes before bed. So now I read, and I've been reading, and it was something that I go through seasons with. And this time round, I'm determined to make it stick. And I know all the extra tools to make it stick this time round. So I'm hoping that that's going to work, because I love it. I genuinely, every single time I get into a habit with reading, I go, oh, well, I'm never going to stop doing this again. You know, it's like, I can't believe I went all this time without doing it. What a fool I was. But every single time I find myself, I don't read for 2 days, and then when do you hit the reset button? And that's I call it the reset button, because I like to tell people and empower a person to know that you can hit reset whenever you want. My big background came from working with people with eating disorders, and it was like, a person with an eating disorder, they'd often, the reset button would be the next day. If you can bring that reset button forward to, you can hit reset for the next meal. Or if you can bring that forward to, you can hit reset as soon as a binge starts, or as soon as you start going what you refer to as off track. And you can just go, right, no, I don't have to write the rest of this time off. That's the one big thing I'd say to someone, is like, if you've got a routine and it works for you, be more mindful of what happens when you miss an item on that. And if you do miss an item on your routine, don't let that be a reason to write off the rest of the day. It doesn't mean you can't do that thing today. It doesn't mean that you can't do the rest of the things on your list. So hit that reset button and say, right, okay, let's get back on track. I refer to it as a course correction on it, rather than being on or off track. On or off track is you're on track, you're off track as soon as one wheel's off the track. It's a catastrophic
That's just
failure.
I mean, even the language and that's just horrible, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk
it's
about
quite technical.
I talk about it as if it's a cruise ship. If it's on a course and it goes 1 degree off, if a train goes 1 degree off track, it's off track. Whereas if a cruise goes 1 degree off course, it's only off course the longer it stays off course. Now that's the whole thing.
I like that bit. Yes.
Yeah, with me, and it's only a little nudge to get it back, because rather than you've got to get the whole thing back on the track. And that's the whole thing, is that everyone goes off track or off plan, or however you want to say it. Everyone makes slips at sooner or later. It comes down to two main things: how many of them you make, and how quickly you recover from them. If a person makes a slip once a day but recovers every single time, then they're going to do better than the person who makes a slip once every 6 months but stays 4 months off track off the result of it. So that's what I would say about routines. It's a very bizarre around the houses question, but I wanted to say something different than what Brooke said, because what Brooke said was spot on too.
No, yeah, both are spot on. Thank you very much. And I do love reading books. So is there any books you can recommend mental health wise? Because I'm always looking for new books all the time.
Not mental health wise.
Any obvious?
The first one I always think of that I think everyone that works with any form of coaching should read is something called The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Right. Such a great book for kind of getting to understand why people do either a combination of, basically it's whether you meet expectations, internal expectations, only, which is a questioner, external expectations only, which is an obliger. Hello. You push back against both, which is a rebel, or you can meet both, which is a upholder. A good 70% of the type of people you're going to work with in the mental health or in the coaching space are going to be obligers. And understanding what makes an obliger tick, it fast forwarded me with clients something rotten. And I am one of them myself, so I should have known all these things all along. But when you see it in writing, it's great. But another one that I really liked was one called emotional agility. We always think about, I think it's by Susan David, and we always think about emotions in this kind of like, oh yeah, we want emotional fitness or whatever. But if we think about agility in terms of physical agility, that's the ability to adapt or the ability to change direction. It's like, again, we've talked so many times about there's no one hard and fast answer and all the rest of it. Agility is being able to implement the answer or a answer that will get you moving in whatever position that you're in. And that's kind of what emotional agility is about as a book.
Brilliant. Okay, what about yourself, Brooke? We spoke about a book the other day.
We did. We spoke about Many Lives, Many Masters, which is fantastic if you're interested in anything past life regression, right? But in terms of mindset and mental health, one that I have read recently, it was actually listened to, was Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil, and it is fascinating. Yeah. Have you read that one? Anybody read that? Fantastic.
Is Napoleon Hill the one who did Think and Grow Rich?
Yes. But this is slightly different. So basically the basis of this book is all about as though Napoleon Hill is interviewing the devil, right? And it's just basically fear. Yeah. Right. So actually talks about just how quickly fear is dripped into your mindset from a very young age. And it's talking about, it's almost as though the fear talks about, I just have to control the parents to control the child. The minute I can control and manipulate the parents' mindset, I can control and manipulate the child's mindset. And if I can keep them drifting through life as opposed to being the driver of their life, I can control the next generation. So it's really, really interesting. And it's almost quite like, whoa, just how easily we can just fear and negativity can just manipulate the generations. So it talks about only 5% of us being the driver of our life, and the person is basically saying the media can't control the driver, fear can't control the driver, and the minute you become the driver of your life, you will ensure your children become the driver of your life, which will ensure that their children, if they don't get then gripped by the fear. It's fascinating. I would honestly suggest listening to it on Audible, because the different changes in the voice tone is almost like, I listen to it in the morning when I'm getting ready, and sometimes I straighten my hair and I'm just like, is that what it's time to do? It is.
Well,
I'm the driver now. I'm the driver.
Get it. So I'll get on that.
Right, get it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, fantastic. I love reading myself. If you ever, obviously I've read Think Big and Grow Rich, and it's kind of done by Earl Nightingale on YouTube. Used to listen to that every night. Used to just put headphones in and just, so it's in subconscious, It's a great book, but obviously with a mental health podcast, we want to kind of talk what's better for mental health here. So exercise, let's get to exercise, Dave. I know we've touched on this on Mind Over Matter podcast. How do you rate that for better mental well-being as well?
So there's a lot of contention around it. There's someone posted on Twitter last week, and they're quite a big mental health journalist, and they basically just posted exercise. The gym is not the cure for depression or whatever. And again, we're coming back to this, people push back against it a hell of a lot, and it's becoming very popular to push back on it again, because it's not 100% of the solution. And it's 10% of the solution for some people. It's 80% of the solution for other people as well. And I think physical exertion is huge. And we talked before about adversity and stuff. And it's like, I don't want my kids to go through the same adversity that I did. But if you actually challenge yourself physically, you can go through a certain degree of adversity there too. For me, exercise is a huge, huge part. In fact, without me even realizing it, it was the first thing I did for my mental health. And I wasn't doing it for my mental health. I was doing it for my physical health. But I just found that I had loads more kind of headspace off the back of it. Now, that headspace diminished over time, and it took me a long time to figure out that it's down to, there's a great technique I learned from a guy called Andrew T. Austin, where you use a juggling ball to make a pendulum with your arms. When I had the principle of this explained to me as to why it shuts off anxiety, suddenly exercise made sense, because what it does is you move your hands in this really sweeping motion. The one that's in the middle stays still, and the one that's got the ball makes this big arc. What it does is brings down the actual anxiety, and it worked. Again, I sat there when it was being demonstrated. I'm like, that's never going to work. But my answer to that is, but let me give it a go. So I went up and I got it demonstrated on me, and I was like, holy crap! And suddenly I was like, okay, this makes sense now as to why exercise worked so well at first and then stopped working as well later on. It's because when I started getting good with that, so when I'd done it 100 times and I was demonstrating it to people, that stopped working for me. So I had to change it to a more complicated movement. And I was like, aha, this is with exercise, we get good at the things we do often, is my number one rule of everything. And with exercise, we get good at it to the point at which we become unconsciously competent. So you can go into the gym and start, doing some pull downs and do all the rest of it, check your phone in between things, and you're not even thinking about the exercise because your brain has done that move so many times that you can now free it up to go back to being anxious or to thinking about whatever it was thinking about. When you first start out, you're doing so much, you're focusing so much on what you're doing that it becomes a form of enforced mindfulness. You have no choice but to be mindful with the exercise. But then when you get good at the exercise, your mind then actually has the capacity to then start thinking about other things, which is why driving, you're thinking about it, you're doing things, but your mind can go, you can get super anxious while driving, and it doesn't mean about the road. So one thing I would say with exercise is do it mindfully. If it is something like, get your focus into the exercise you're doing. I go to yoga for this very reason. I go to a 1-to-1 each week. This is my big piece of self-care that I do every single week. And the reason I go to a 1-to-1 is because I want to be constantly checked in with that my feet are in the right place or my arms in the right place, because I know that if that's not happening, then my mind will wander and it'll go other places. When I do it with videos, I learn the videos to the point at which I could do them in my sleep. And therefore I'm like, okay, I'm moving into downward dog now, but my brain's already thinking because it's got the capacity. Whereas when Sharon, my instructor, says to me, now, Dave, where are your heels? I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I was just thinking about whether that post has performed well on social media and I'm back in with the heels. It's doing it mindfully. That is where the kind of big deal comes from me. That and the whole pushing your comfort zone, because it teaches you what you're capable of. I ran my first ultra marathon this year, and because out of sheer the gyms are closed boredom, and it was like, okay, well, I vowed to never run a marathon ever again, and then the gyms got closed. So I'm like, well, what else am I supposed to do? So I ran 2 marathons. I ran one without any outside, what's the word I'm looking for, acknowledgement, which was a big deal for me because, again, am I doing things for me or am I doing them for anyone else? Who knows? So I ran one just to test myself, and then the second time I'm like, right, I'm gonna kind of like do this as a fundraiser, and then off the back of that I ended up running an ultra marathon. Something different came out of my head in those 3 events that has never come out of my head before. I actually think of it as a little bit like not my David Goggins, but Jocko Willink. Have you ever seen the Good video?
Yeah.
Good. It's like that came out in my head. It's like, I'm really sore. Good. Keep going. It's like, and I'm like, who the hell is that? That's like a voice I've never heard in there before. And it's a great way to discover. So do it mindfully, and also do it in a way that pushes your comfort zone.
Yeah, fantastic exercise. Yeah, for me, I look into a lot of Ross Edgley and his works. I've just kind of studied his book, The Art of Resilience. He's very stoic, and he has his own way of training. But I kind of buy into his way of training because it's, again, like you say, it's to do with mindfulness. It's fantastic. I don't know if you've ever, obviously, you know who Ross Edgley is, but have you ever kind of tapped into his work or?
I've listened to him in interviews and things like that. I find one of the things I find fascinating about him is he talked about when he did the perimeter swim. He'd basically remember to smile, and this is another one of those things that is so underrated and it's so fought against. And I think it's fought against because men spent far too many times telling women to smile, and therefore telling someone to smile is now seen as like one of the most horrible things you could ever do to someone. It's like, okay, I'm not telling you to smile because I need to see you smile and I want you to look prettier or anything. It's like, I'm telling you to smile because actually when you do smile, does cause different things inside your mind. And Ross Edgley swears by that. And one of my friends, Sam, the one I said before, he's an ultra runner. It's probably his fault that I got into it. He did a 75 miler across the moors the other day. And he said that he's been, ever since reading Ross Edgley's book, he's been applying the smile thing. And he says, as soon as if he finds himself struggling, the second he puts that smile on his face now, like the pain and the suffering he's experiencing goes down by like 20-30%. And it's like, it's amazing. It's I would say again, it's one of those things that people have pushed back against it now because of how it's been used. Toxic positivity, that's kind of thrown around a hell of a lot these days. And it's almost when we see that the pendulum swings all the way the other way, and it's like, again, we get back into this whole disempowered, this won't work situation. And again, I think we need to get back to the idea of, okay, these things are all going to work piece by piece. And it might just be the thing that actually kind of helps you get that extra 5%, that helps you feel like your head's above the water again.
Yeah. And that's me plugging Ross Edgley, by the way. Do buy his book, Art of Resilience. It's I must say. But, like I say, again, it's great having you on. It's great speaking to you. I learn so much off you, and I really do appreciate you having the time for myself and Brooke, Brooke, is there anything you kind of want to add, or?
No, I think it's been good. I think there'll be a lot of takeaways for this discussion. I think there'll be a lot of people who will literally there'll be a lot that will have resonated with people, and I think it's been a good conversation, certainly, to hear the different sides of what we're all coming from. And I think just what I would just add is just be yourself. That's what, if there's anybody listening, if there's anybody else that's in this field, if you're in whatever field you're in, just the easiest thing is learning about yourself and just working yourself.
Absolutely. And Dave, is there anywhere we can find you on for the viewers out there?
Yeah, just Mindset by Dave on every social media platform ever. Whatever I say, whatever your favorite one is to actually find someone and to find them on. My favorites are YouTube and Instagram. But yeah, Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. I'm literally everywhere.
Everybody needs to get on LinkedIn. It's the best place that I've went on. It's really good for networking.
It's the best place to be bloody marketed to. That's all I ever get. All I ever get on LinkedIn is, "Hi, I'm a person who helps coaches get 6-figure businesses." I'm like, it's like, that's great. I'm so happy.
That's a whole different podcast in itself.
You're the 15th person to tell me that today. So why should I choose you over the other 14? That's all LinkedIn is to me, unfortunately.
Again, for the viewers out there, watch Dave's stuff. It really is special, and like I say, your blogs, your videos, everything that he does is great, and it's done with a good intention. It really is, from the heart. And I've been following you for a long time, as I've said before. And again, thank you kindly for coming on, mate. It really is appreciated.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Great conversation.
You too. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you again. And guys, thank you for tuning in to the Let's Talk Mental Health podcast and lifting the stigma alongside myself, Mindset by Dave, and Brooke Longmore. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Good night and God bless.
Good night.
Night.
Let's Talk Mental Health podcast is sponsored by Torrance House Interiors, East Kilbride. Concept by you, designed and managed by us. Bespoke luxury kitchens, bathrooms and room interiors. Contact us at info@torrancehouseinteriors.com or phone 07400 600 556.